Marcus Thompson had always been the kind of man who helped others without thinking twice. At 35, he worked as a construction foreman in downtown Chicago, managing building projects that stretched his crew thin but paid just enough to keep his small apartment and aging pickup truck running. He wasn't wealthy, but he was content with his simple life. The weather forecast that Tuesday morning had been ominous. Dark clouds gathered over Lake Michigan as meteorologists warned of a severe thunderstorm system moving through the city. Most people hurried to get home early, but Marcus stayed late at the construction site, securing equipment and making sure everything was properly covered. His crew had already left, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something might get damaged if he didn't double-check everything. By the time he finished, rain was already beginning to fall in heavy drops. The wind picked up dramatically, turning the drops into stinging projectiles. Marcus pulled his worn jacket tighter and jogged toward his truck, parked 3 blocks away on a side street where parking was free. The storm seemed to intensify with each step he took. As he reached his truck, the sky opened up completely. Rain poured down in sheets so thick he could barely see 10 feet ahead. Thunder crashed overhead and lightning illuminated the empty streets in brief, startling flashes. Marcus fumbled with his keys, trying to unlock the truck door while getting completely soaked. That's when he heard it. Over the roar of the storm, over the thunder and the sound of rain hitting metal and concrete, he heard something that made his blood run cold. It was the sound of a baby crying. At first, he thought he might be imagining it. Who would have a baby out in weather like this? But as he stood still and listened, the crying became unmistakable. It was coming from somewhere nearby, probably from the alley that ran behind the row of small shops across the street. Without hesitation, Marcus abandoned his truck and ran toward the sound. The rain was so heavy it felt like running through a waterfall. His work boots splashed through puddles that were already several inches deep. The wind nearly knocked him off balance twice as he crossed the street. The crying grew louder as he entered the narrow alley. Emergency lighting from the buildings cast eerie shadows, but in the next lightning flash, Marcus saw something that made his heart skip. There, next to a large dumpster, was what looked like a car seat or baby carrier, partially covered by a piece of cardboard that was doing little to protect it from the storm. Marcus ran to the spot and dropped to his knees. Inside the carrier was a baby, probably no more than 6 months old, crying desperately. The little girl was soaked through, her tiny clothes clinging to her small body. Her lips were starting to turn blue from the cold, and she was shivering uncontrollably. "Hey there, sweetheart," Marcus said softly, trying to keep his voice calm despite the panic rising in his chest. "It's okay, I'm here now." He quickly unbuttoned his jacket and wrapped it around the baby and the entire carrier. The jacket was already soaked, but it would provide some protection from the wind and rain. As he lifted the carrier, he looked around desperately for any sign of the baby's parents or guardian. The alley was empty except for overflowing dumpsters and the emergency exits of various businesses, all of which were locked tight. Marcus's mind raced. How had a baby ended up here? Was this abandonment? An accident? Had someone been forced to leave her here during the storm? None of it made sense, but right now the only thing that mattered was getting this little girl somewhere warm and dry. His truck was the closest option, but it wasn't much of a shelter. The heater worked, but barely, and he had nothing suitable for a baby. He needed to find help immediately. As he carried the baby back toward his truck, shielding her as much as possible from the storm, he tried to think of the nearest place that would be open and have people who could help. The baby's crying had quieted slightly, but Marcus could feel her small body still shivering against his chest. Every parental instinct he never knew he had was screaming at him to move faster, to find help now. The hospital was 15 minutes away in good weather, but in this storm, with flooded streets and limited visibility, it could take much longer. Then he remembered the all-night diner 6 blocks away. Betty's place had been serving coffee and comfort food to night shift workers and insomniacs for 30 years. Betty Martinez, the owner, was a grandmother several times over and would know what to do. More importantly, the diner would be warm, dry, and have a phone he could use to call for proper help. Marcus gently placed the baby carrier in the passenger seat of his truck and buckled it in as securely as he could manage. The baby looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes, but she had stopped crying. He started the engine and turned the heat up as high as it would go, though the old truck took several minutes to warm up properly. Driving through the storm was treacherous. The windshield wipers could barely keep up with the rain, and the streets were flooding rapidly. Marcus drove slowly and carefully, constantly glancing over at the baby to make sure she was okay. She seemed to be warming up slightly, but her tiny face was still pale, and he could see she was exhausted from crying. "We're almost there, little one," he murmured, though he wasn't sure she could hear him over the sound of the storm battering the truck. "Just hold on a little longer." As he navigated the flooded streets toward Betty's place, Marcus couldn't shake the questions running through his mind. Who was this baby? How had she ended up alone in that alley during one of the worst storms Chicago had seen all year? And most importantly, was she going to be okay? The neon sign for Betty's place came into view through the rain-streaked windshield, its red letters flickering but still visible. Marcus had never been so relieved to see that familiar sign. Help was just moments away, and this beautiful little girl was going to be safe. Marcus burst through the door of Betty's place, dripping wet and carrying the baby carrier carefully in both arms. The familiar warmth of the diner hit him immediately, along with the comforting smells of coffee and grilled food. Several late-night customers looked up in surprise as he entered, their conversations stopping mid-sentence. "Betty," Marcus called out, his voice urgent but trying not to frighten the baby further. "Betty, I need help." Betty Martinez emerged from behind the counter, wiping her hands on her apron. At 62, she had raised 4 children and helped with countless grandchildren, so she recognized crisis when she saw it. Her experienced eyes immediately took in the situation: the soaked man, the baby carrier, and the small face peering out from beneath the wet jacket. "Dios mío, what happened?" she asked, rushing toward them. "Bring her back here, quickly." Betty led Marcus to a booth in the back corner of the diner, the one she usually reserved for employees taking breaks. Without being asked, she grabbed a stack of clean towels from behind the counter and a blanket from the small cot she kept in the office for particularly long shifts. "I found her in the alley behind Morrison Street," Marcus explained as Betty carefully lifted the baby from the carrier. She was just sitting there in the storm, completely alone. I don't know how long she'd been there, but she was soaked through and shivering. Betty's hands moved with practiced efficiency, gently removing the wet clothes from the baby while talking to her in soothing Spanish. The little girl had stopped crying but was clearly exhausted and still cold. Betty wrapped her in the warm, dry blanket and held her close, immediately beginning to rock back and forth. "She's beautiful," Betty murmured, examining the baby with the careful eye of someone who had seen many children. "Maybe 6 months old, I think. Look at those eyes, so alert and intelligent. She's been well cared for, this one. These aren't cheap clothes, and see how her hair has been carefully styled? Someone loves this baby very much." Marcus felt a wave of relief hearing that the baby appeared healthy and well cared for, but it only deepened the mystery. Then why was she alone in an alley during a storm like this? "We need to call the police," Betty said, still rocking the baby gently. "But first, let's get her completely warmed up and see if we can get some formula into her." "Maria," she called to one of her waitresses, "run to the convenience store next door and get some baby formula in bottles. Tell Jimmy it's an emergency and I'll pay him back tomorrow." While Maria hurried out into the storm, Betty continued her examination of the baby. She found something that made her pause: a small, expensive-looking bracelet around the baby's wrist. It was delicate white gold with tiny diamonds, clearly custom-made and worth more than most people made in a month. "Marcus, look at this," Betty said, showing him the bracelet. "This isn't costume jewelry. This is real, and it's expensive. Very expensive." Marcus leaned in closer, studying the intricate bracelet. Even with his limited knowledge of jewelry, he could tell it was valuable. There was an engraving on the back, but the letters were too small to read clearly in the diner's lighting. "Should we take it off?" he asked. "No, leave it. The police will want to see everything exactly as we found it. But this tells us something important. This baby comes from money." "Serious money?" Maria returned quickly with the formula and bottles, shaking rain from her jacket. "Jimmy says don't worry about paying," she reported. "He wants to know if the baby's okay." Betty expertly prepared a bottle while Marcus called the police. The dispatcher told him that emergency services were overwhelmed with storm-related calls, but they would send an officer as soon as possible. In the meantime, she advised them to keep the baby warm and safe, and to contact Child Protective Services if no officer arrived within 2 hours. The baby took the bottle eagerly, which was another good sign. Betty smiled as she fed her, noting how the little girl's color was improving as she warmed up. She's a fighter, this one. Strong and healthy. Whoever her parents are, they've taken good care of her. As they waited, other customers in the diner began to take interest in the situation. Tommy Reeves, a security guard who worked nights at a nearby office building, came over to the booth where they were sitting. "I might have seen something," he said quietly. "About an hour ago, maybe a little more, I was doing my rounds when I saw this black SUV speed past. Expensive-looking thing, you know? It was driving way too fast for the weather, and it looked like it was in a hurry to get somewhere. Could be nothing, but with the storm and all, it struck me as odd." Marcus looked up with interest. "Which direction was it heading?" "Toward the lake," Tommy replied. "But here's the weird part. About 10 minutes later, I saw what might have been the same SUV heading back the other way, going even faster. Nearly lost control taking the corner onto Madison Street." Betty frowned thoughtfully. "You think someone might have left the baby and then changed their mind? Or maybe they were forced to leave her," Marcus suggested grimly. "What if someone was threatening them? What if they had to choose between their own safety and the baby's?" The possibilities were disturbing to consider. Betty held the baby a little tighter, looking down at the peaceful face that was finally relaxing as warmth and food did their work. Whatever happened, she's safe now. That's what matters most. Officer Sarah Chen arrived about 40 minutes later, looking harried and tired. The storm had created chaos throughout the city. Flooding, power outages, accidents, and numerous emergency calls. She listened carefully to Marcus's account of finding the baby, taking detailed notes and asking specific questions about the exact location and circumstances. "You did the right thing bringing her here," Officer Chen told them. "Hospitals are overwhelmed right now with storm-related injuries, and this was definitely the best place for her immediate needs." She photographed the baby, the carrier, and the bracelet, being careful to document the engraving. Under the bright light of her flashlight, the words became clearer. Sophia Rose was engraved in elegant script on one side, and on the other, "Forever loved, M&D." "Sophia," Betty said softly. "Her name is Sophia Rose." Officer Chen ran the information through her database, but nothing came up immediately. No missing person reports, no Amber Alerts, nothing that matched the description of a 6-month-old girl named Sophia Rose. "This is puzzling," the officer admitted. "Usually when a baby goes missing, we hear about it immediately. Parents call within minutes, sometimes seconds, but we have no reports of a missing child matching her description." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with his still damp clothes. "What does that mean?" "It could mean several things," Officer Chen replied carefully. "Maybe the parents don't know she's missing yet. Maybe they're unable to report it for some reason. Or maybe—" She paused, clearly not wanting to voice the darker possibilities. Betty stood up, still holding Sophia, who had fallen asleep in her arms. "Whatever the reason, this little angel is going to be taken care of. I can promise you that." As Officer Chen prepared to take custody of baby Sophia, Marcus felt an unexpected reluctance to let her go. In the space of an hour, he had gone from being a single man with no children to feeling protective of this tiny person he had rescued from the storm. The feeling surprised him with its intensity. 3 days had passed since Marcus found baby Sophia in the storm, and he couldn't stop thinking about her. He had returned to work, trying to focus on his construction projects, but his mind kept wandering to those intelligent brown eyes and the way she had looked at him when he first picked her up. He found himself checking local news websites constantly, hoping for some update about her case. Officer Chen had given him her business card and promised to call if there were any developments, but so far his phone had remained silent. The mystery of how Sophia ended up alone in that alley seemed to deepen rather than resolve as time passed. On Friday morning, Marcus was reviewing blueprints in the construction trailer when his phone rang. The number wasn't familiar, but he answered anyway. "Mr. Thompson, this is Detective Rodriguez with Chicago PD. Officer Chen asked me to give you a call about the baby you found." Marcus's heart rate picked up immediately. "Yes, of course. Is she okay? Have you found her parents?" "The baby is fine," Detective Rodriguez assured him. "She's in excellent health and has been placed with a very experienced foster family temporarily. But we've made some progress on the case, and frankly, it's gotten complicated. We'd like you to come down to the station if you have time today." Marcus left the construction site immediately. telling his crew he had an emergency to handle. The police station was only 15 minutes away, but traffic made it feel much longer. His mind raced with possibilities. Had they found Sophia's parents? Was she in danger? Were the police suspecting him of something? Detective Rodriguez turned out to be a tall, serious woman in her 40s with kind eyes but a no-nonsense demeanor. She led Marcus to a small conference room where Officer Chen was already waiting with a file folder, thick with papers. "Mr. Thompson, thank you for coming in so quickly," Detective Rodriguez began. "What I'm about to tell you needs to stay confidential while we continue our investigation. Can you agree to that?" Marcus nodded, his curiosity and concern growing stronger. "We've identified baby Sophia," Officer Chen said, opening the file. "Her full name is Sophia Rose Chen Williams. She's the daughter of David Chen and Rebecca Williams." The names meant nothing to Marcus, but both officers were watching his reaction carefully, as if expecting recognition. "Should I know those names?" he asked. Detective Rodriguez slid a photograph across the table. It showed a well-dressed Asian man in his 30s, standing next to a beautiful woman with light brown hair. They were at what appeared to be a charity gala, both smiling for the camera. "David Chen is the CEO of Chen Industries," Detective Rodriguez explained. "It's a technology company that's grown incredibly fast over the past 5 years. They develop software for major corporations and government agencies. David is worth approximately $200 million. Marcus stared at the photograph, trying to process what he was being told. "So Sophia is the daughter of a billionaire?" "Not quite a billionaire, but close enough," Officer Chen confirmed. "Rebecca Williams is his fiancée. She comes from old Chicago money. Her family owns several major real estate developments throughout the city. Together they're worth more than most small countries." "Then why haven't they reported her missing?" Marcus asked, the question that had been bothering him since that first night. The two officers exchanged a look that suggested the answer was more complicated than Marcus might expect. "That's where things get interesting," Detective Rodriguez said. "We contacted them yesterday expecting to arrange a happy reunion. But when we spoke to David Chen, he claimed that Sophia was with Rebecca visiting her parents in Wisconsin. When we called Rebecca, she insisted that Sophia was home with David and their nanny." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "Neither of them knows she's missing?" "It gets stranger," Officer Chen continued. "When we pressed them for details, both David and Rebecca became evasive. David finally admitted that he and Rebecca had been having problems and weren't currently living together. Rebecca said she thought David was being deliberately difficult and trying to keep Sophia away from her. We arranged to meet with both of them together yesterday evening." Detective Rodriguez picked up the story. "That's when we discovered that neither of them had actually seen Sophia for nearly a week." Marcus sat back in his chair, stunned. How do two wealthy parents not know where their 6-month-old baby is for a week? "That's exactly what we're trying to figure out," Detective Rodriguez said grimly. "David claimed he thought Rebecca had taken Sophia to her parents' house in Wisconsin, which apparently is something she's done before during their arguments. Rebecca insisted that David had told her he was taking Sophia on a business trip to California and that they would be back in a few days." Officer Chen leaned forward. "Here's the problem. Neither story checks out. Rebecca's parents confirmed that neither Rebecca nor Sophia had visited them recently. David's business calendar shows no trips to California. And here's the most disturbing part. Their nanny, Maria Santos, disappeared the same day that Sophia went missing." "You think the nanny took her?" Marcus asked. "We don't know what to think yet," Detective Rodriguez admitted. "Maria Santos had worked for them for 8 months and had excellent references. But she withdrew all the money from her bank account 3 days before Sophia disappeared, and her apartment has been cleaned out." Marcus thought about the expensive bracelet, the quality clothes, and the well-cared-for appearance of the baby when he found her. "But Sophia looked healthy and well cared for when I found her. If someone had kidnapped her, wouldn't she have been in worse condition?" "That's one of the things that doesn't add up," Officer Chen agreed. "Everything about her suggested she had been properly fed, cleaned, and cared for right up until the moment she was left in that alley." Detective Rodriguez pulled out another photograph, this one showing a young Latina woman with a gentle face and warm smile. "This is Maria Santos. Have you ever seen her before?" Marcus studied the photograph carefully, but the face was completely unfamiliar. "No, I've never seen her." We're working on the theory that Maria may have taken Sophia for her own protection, Detective Rodriguez explained. David Chen and Rebecca Williams have been having very public, very ugly fights. There have been police calls to their residence 4 times in the past 2 months for domestic disturbances. You think Maria was protecting Sophia from her own parents? It's possible, Officer Chen said. But if that's the case, why abandon her in an alley during a storm? Why not take her to family services or the police? Marcus thought about this for a moment, remembering Tommy's story about the black SUV speeding through the storm. What if someone was chasing Maria? What if she had to choose between getting caught with Sophia or leaving her somewhere she hoped someone would find her quickly? Both officers looked at him with renewed interest. Tell us more about that. Theory, Detective Rodriguez said. One of the guys at the diner that night mentioned seeing an expensive SUV driving erratically through the storm, going toward the lake and then back again very quickly. What if Maria was being followed? What if she realized she couldn't get away with Sophia, so she left her in a place where she knew someone would find her soon? Officer Chen made a note. That would explain the timing, and it would explain why she chose that particular alley. It's visible from the street, but protected from the worst of the storm. There's something else, Detective Rodriguez said, pulling out a final document. We found Maria's car abandoned near the lake, about 2 miles from where you found Sophia. There were signs of a struggle inside the vehicle. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Is she okay? Did someone hurt her? We don't know, Detective Rodriguez admitted. We're treating this as a potential kidnapping case now, with Maria Santos as the victim and baby Sophia as a witness who can't tell us what she saw. A week later, Marcus received another call from Detective Rodriguez, but this time, her voice carried a note of urgency that immediately put him on edge. The investigation had taken several unexpected turns, and the police needed his help with something they had never encountered before. Mr. Thompson, we need you to come to the station again, but this time, we'd like you to meet with David Chen and Rebecca Williams. They've specifically requested to speak with the person who found Sophia. Marcus felt nervous about meeting people who moved in such different circles from his own. Are you sure that's a good idea? I'm just a construction worker who happened to be in the right place at the right time. That's exactly why they want to meet you, Detective Rodriguez explained. And there have been some developments in the case that we think you should know about. When Marcus arrived at the police station an hour later, he was surprised to find a media circus outside. News vans lined the street, and reporters with cameras were interviewing anyone willing to talk. The story of baby Sophia had apparently leaked to the press, and the combination of wealth, mystery, and a missing child had captured public attention. Inside the station, Detective Rodriguez led him to a different conference room, larger than the one they had used before. Sitting at the table were 2 people Marcus recognized from the photographs, David Chen and Rebecca Williams. In person, they both looked exhausted and worried, nothing like the confident, glamorous couple from the charity gala picture. David Chen stood up immediately when Marcus entered. He was shorter than Marcus had expected, but his handshake was firm and his eyes were intense with emotion. Mr. Thompson, David said, his voice thick with gratitude, I can't begin to thank you for what you did. If you hadn't found Sophia when you did. He couldn't finish the sentence. Rebecca Williams also stood, and Marcus could see that she had been crying recently. Despite her obvious wealth and the expensive clothes she wore, there was something genuine and vulnerable about her that surprised him. Please, sit down, she said softly. We need to tell you what we've discovered about Maria and what happened that night. Detective Rodriguez took her seat and opened a new file folder. We found Maria Santos yesterday, she announced. Marcus felt his heart skip. Is she alive? Yes, but barely, Detective Rodriguez said grimly. She's in the hospital with a severe concussion and several broken ribs. She was found unconscious in an abandoned warehouse near the docks. David Chen's hands clenched into fists on the table. She was beaten, Marcus. Someone tried to kill her. But she's awake now, Rebecca added quickly, and she was able to tell us what really happened that night. Detective Rodriguez pulled out a recording device. With Maria's permission, I'd like you to hear part of her statement. It explains why Sophia ended up in that alley, and it explains why your quick thinking probably saved her life. The recording was fuzzy, and Maria's voice was weak and sometimes difficult to understand, but her story was chilling. She explained that she had worked for David and Rebecca for 8 months and had grown to love Sophia like her own daughter. She had become increasingly concerned about the fighting between David and Rebecca, but what really frightened her were the threatening phone calls that had started coming to the house. Someone was watching the family, Maria's voice said on the recording. They knew when Mr. Chen left for work, when Miss Williams went shopping, when I took Sophia to the park. They knew our whole routine. The calls had escalated over the past month, with someone demanding money from David Chen and threatening to harm Sophia if he didn't pay. David had been handling the situation privately, trying to protect both Rebecca and Maria from the stress of knowing about the threats. But that night, during the storm, they came to the house. Maria's voice continued, becoming more agitated. Two men. They had guns. They said they were taking Sophia and that Mr. Chen had 24 hours to transfer $50 million, or he would never see her again. Marcus looked at David Chen, whose face had gone pale as he listened to the recording again. Maria tried to protect Sophia, Rebecca said, her voice breaking. She grabbed her and ran out the back door while I was calling 911. The men chased her. On the recording, Maria explained how she had managed to get to her car with Sophia and drive away, but the men had followed her in a black SUV. She had driven through the storm trying to lose them, but they had stayed right behind her. I knew I couldn't outrun them forever, Maria's voice said, and I knew if they caught me with Sophia, they would take her and probably kill me. So I decided to leave her somewhere safe, somewhere I knew someone would find her quickly. The recording explained that Maria had chosen the alley specifically because she knew it was visible from the street where people parked for Betty's place. She had hoped someone would find Sophia quickly and call the police after I left her. I tried to lead the men away from that area, Maria continued. I drove toward the lake, hoping they would follow me and not go back looking for Sophia. But they caught me near the docks. Detective Rodriguez stopped the recording. The men beat Maria severely and left her for dead. They probably assumed she would die and never be able to tell anyone what happened. Marcus sat in stunned silence, trying to process everything he had learned. So if I hadn't found Sophia when I did, she could have been in that alley all night, David Chen finished. In that storm, with the temperature dropping, she might not have survived. Rebecca reached across the table and touched Marcus's hand. You saved our daughter's life. Maria risked everything to protect her, and you made sure her sacrifice wasn't in vain. What about the men who did this? Marcus asked. Have you caught them? Detective Rodriguez's expression darkened. That's where things get complicated again. We know who they are. They work for a man named Vincent Torino who runs an illegal gambling operation. Apparently, David had accumulated a significant debt. David Chen looked ashamed as he met Marcus's eyes. I made some very poor decisions over the past year. Rebecca and I were having problems. I was stressed about work, and I started gambling online. What began as a way to blow off steam became an addiction that cost me almost everything. David lost $12 million over 6 months, Rebecca added quietly. He mortgaged properties, liquidated investments, even borrowed against his company without telling me. When I couldn't pay anymore, Torino's people started threatening my family, David continued. I thought I could handle it myself, protect everyone by keeping quiet about it. I was wrong. Detective Rodriguez leaned forward. The good news is that we've arrested 3 of Torino's associates, including the 2 men who attacked Maria. But Torino himself has disappeared, and we believe he may try again. Marcus looked around the table at the faces of people whose lives had been turned upside down by greed and poor choices. What happens now? Now we make sure Sophia stays safe, Rebecca said firmly. David is getting help for his gambling problem, and we're working together to repair our relationship and our family. David nodded. I've also hired private security, and we're cooperating fully with the FBI to bring down Torino's entire operation. And we want to do something for you, Rebecca added, looking at Marcus with sincere gratitude. We know you didn't ask for anything, and we know you can't be bought, but we want to find a way to thank you properly. Marcus shook his head. I don't need anything. I'm just glad Sophia is safe and back with her family. But even as he said it, Marcus knew that this experience had changed him in ways he was still trying to understand. Finding Sophia had awakened something in him, a sense of purpose and connection that he had never felt before. 2 months after the night of the storm, Marcus's life had taken turns he never could have imagined. The media attention from saving Sophia had died down, but the impact of that night continued to ripple through his world in unexpected ways. He was finishing up work on a residential building project when his phone rang. The caller ID showed David Chen's number, something that still surprised Marcus every time he saw it. Over the past weeks, David had been calling regularly, not just to provide updates on the criminal case, but to check on Marcus and maintain the friendship that had developed between them. "Marcus, I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." David's voice came through clearly. "I wanted to give you an update on Maria, and there's something else I'd like to discuss with you." "How is she doing?" Marcus asked, setting down his tools and moving to a quieter area of the construction site. "Much better. The doctors say she'll make a full recovery, though it's going to take several more months of physical therapy. But here's the amazing part. She wants to come back to work for us. After everything she went through to protect Sophia, she still considers us family." Marcus smiled, thinking about the brave woman who had risked her life for a baby she wasn't even related to. That says a lot about the kind of person she is, and the kind of people you and Rebecca are too. "Actually, that brings me to what I wanted to talk to you about," David said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "Rebecca and I have been discussing this for weeks, and we have a proposal for you. Could you meet us for dinner tonight? There's someone else we'd like you to meet." Marcus felt curious but also a little wary. He had learned that when very wealthy people had proposals, they were usually more complicated than they appeared. But his friendship with David and Rebecca had grown genuine over the past months, and he trusted them. "Sure," he agreed. "Where did you have in mind?" "Actually, we'd like to cook for you at our house. Rebecca makes an amazing lasagna, and it'll give you a chance to see Sophia again. She's grown so much since you last saw her." That evening, Marcus drove to an address in one of Chicago's most exclusive neighborhoods. The Chen Williams home was a beautiful restored Victorian mansion, but despite its size and obvious expense, it felt warm and welcoming when Rebecca opened the door. "Marcus." She greeted him with a genuine hug. "I'm so glad you could come. Sophia's been having a fussy day, but I swear she perks up whenever we mention your name." Inside, Marcus was struck by how normal the house felt. Yes, there were expensive furnishings and artwork, but there were also baby toys scattered around, family photos on every surface, and the comfortable clutter of people who actually lived there rather than just displayed their wealth. David appeared from the kitchen, carrying baby Sophia, who had indeed grown significantly since Marcus had last seen her. She was sitting up on her own now, and her hair had gotten thicker and curlier. When she saw Marcus, she reached out her little arms toward him. "I think she remembers you," David said with a grin, passing Sophia to Marcus. Holding her again brought back all the emotions from that stormy night. The fear, the urgency, but also the overwhelming protective instinct that had surprised him with its intensity. Sophia babbled at him and grabbed his finger, and Marcus felt that same connection he had experienced in the alley. "She's beautiful," he said softly, "and she looks so healthy and happy." "Thanks to you," Rebecca said, but Marcus waved off the gratitude as he always did. During dinner, they were joined by another guest, Dr. Elena Vasquez, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an easy smile. David introduced her as the director of Chicago Children's Foundation, a nonprofit organization that helped at-risk children and families throughout the city. "I've heard a lot about you, Marcus," Dr. Vasquez said as they sat down to Rebecca's promised lasagna. "David and Rebecca have been telling me about your actions during the storm, but also about your character and your values." Marcus felt a little uncomfortable being the center of attention, but Dr. Vasquez had a way of making conversation feel natural and unforced. As they talked, she shared stories about the foundation's work, helping homeless families find stable housing, providing educational support for underprivileged children, and connecting at-risk youth with mentors and opportunities. "The foundation has been incredibly successful," Rebecca explained, "but we've reached a point where we need to expand our operations. We want to open a new facility on the south side of Chicago, in a neighborhood where the need is greatest but resources are most limited." David leaned forward, his expression serious but excited. "We've purchased a building. It's an old community center that's been abandoned for years. The structure is solid, but it needs complete renovation to turn it into a modern facility that can serve hundreds of families." Marcus began to see where the conversation was heading. "You want me to manage the construction project?" "More than that," Dr. Vasquez said. "We want you to oversee the entire renovation. but we also want you to consider joining the foundation permanently. David and Rebecca have established a new position, Director of Community Outreach and Development. The person in this role would manage construction projects but also work directly with families, coordinate with local organizations, and help shape our programs. Marcus set down his fork, stunned. I don't know anything about running a nonprofit. I'm a construction worker. You're a man who risked his own safety to save a child he'd never met, Rebecca countered gently. You're someone who sees a problem and takes action to fix it. Those are exactly the qualities we need, David nodded. Marcus, in the past 2 months I've gotten to know you pretty well. You have something that can't be taught. You genuinely care about people and you have the courage to act on that caring. The administrative skills can be learned. Dr. Vasquez pulled out a folder and slid it across the table to Marcus. This is just preliminary information, but it will give you an idea of what we're proposing. The salary would be competitive with what you're making now, plus benefits and a significant budget to work with. More importantly, you'd be in a position to make a real difference in people's lives every single day. Marcus opened the folder and saw architectural plans for the renovation, budget projections, and program descriptions. The scope of what they were planning was impressive. After-school programs, job training for adults, childcare services, health clinics, and community meeting spaces. This is amazing, Marcus said, studying the plans. This could change the entire neighborhood. That's the idea, Rebecca said. But we need the right person to make it happen. Someone who understands construction and project management, but who also understands what it means to struggle, to work hard for what you have, and to care about people who don't have the same advantages. Marcus looked up from the folder to find 3 pairs of eyes watching him hopefully. Baby Sophia, who had been sitting in her high chair playing with toys, chose that moment to throw her sippy cup on the floor and clap her hands, as if offering her own endorsement of the proposal. I need time to think about this, Marcus said honestly. It's a huge change and I want to make sure I'm the right person for it. Of course, Dr. Vasquez said. Take all the time you need. But I hope you'll consider it seriously. We've interviewed dozens of candidates for this position. People with impressive resumes and years of nonprofit experience. But none of them had what you have, which is what? Marcus asked. David smiled. Heart. You have the heart for this work, Marcus. Everything else can be taught. After dinner, as Marcus prepared to leave, Rebecca walked him to the door while David put Sophia to bed. There's something else, she said quietly. Something David didn't mention because he knows you'd be uncomfortable with it. Marcus waited, sensing that whatever she was about to say was important. The foundation project is being funded by a trust that David and I established. It's separate from our personal wealth, and it's designed to continue operating long after we're gone. But the initial funding, the money to buy the building, renovate it, and operate it for the first 5 years, comes from the $12 million David lost gambling. Marcus looked confused. I don't understand. David managed to recover most of the money he lost when the FBI shut down Torino's operation. Instead of keeping it, we decided to use it for something that would honor what Maria did for our family and what you did for Sophia. The entire foundation exists because of that night in the storm. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they were offering him. It wasn't just a job. It was a chance to transform the trauma and fear of that night into something positive that would help countless families. Marcus, Rebecca said softly, you saved our daughter's life. But more than that, you reminded us of what really matters. You showed us that heroism isn't about wealth or power. It's about being willing to act when someone needs help, even when it's inconvenient or difficult or scary. As Marcus drove home that night, his mind raced with possibilities. The offer was tempting, not because of the money or prestige, but because it represented a chance to make the kind of difference he had always wanted to make, but never known how to pursue. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the main hall of the newly renovated Chicago Children's Foundation Southside Center, watching as families streamed through the doors for the grand opening celebration. The transformation of the old community center had been challenging, but seeing it filled with laughter, children playing, and parents connecting with resources and support made every difficult day worth it. The renovation had taken 4 months of intensive work, but Marcus had discovered that he loved the complexity of managing not just construction schedules and budgets, but also coordinating with social workers, teachers, healthcare providers, and community leaders. Every decision had to be made with the families who would use the center in mind, and that sense of purpose had energized him in ways his previous work never had. Marcus. Betty Martinez's voice called out across the crowd. She was walking toward him with a huge smile, accompanied by several of the late-night regulars from her diner. Look at what you've built. Marcus hugged Betty warmly, grateful that she had made the trip from her neighborhood to see the center. We built it, he corrected. None of this would have happened without that night at your place. Speaking of that night, Betty said with a mischievous grin, there's someone here who's been looking for you. She stepped aside to reveal Maria Santos, walking slowly but steadily, still recovering from her injuries but looking healthy and determined. Behind her, David and Rebecca approached with Sophia, who was now walking on her own and had grown into a curious, energetic toddler. Marcus, Maria said, her voice strong and clear. She hugged him tightly, and Marcus was amazed at how much stronger she seemed than the last time he had seen her in the hospital. Maria, you look wonderful, he said sincerely.
How are you feeling?
Every day better, she replied. And I wanted to be here today to see what you've created. This place is going to change so many lives. Sophia toddled over to Marcus, her arms raised in the universal toddler signal for pick-me-up. As he lifted her, she babbled something that sounded like Marcus, making everyone laugh. She's been practicing that all week, Rebecca said with a smile. David swears it was her first real word, but I think it was just coincidence. It wasn't coincidence, David said firmly, joining the group. This kid knows exactly who saved her life. Dr. Vasquez appeared beside them, carrying a clipboard and looking satisfied with how the opening day was progressing. Marcus, the mayor wants to meet you, and there are some reporters who'd like to ask you a few questions about the center. Marcus had gotten more comfortable with media attention over the past months, though he still preferred to focus on the work rather than himself. Sure, but first I want to show everyone the memorial wall. He led the group to a quiet corner of the main hall where a beautiful wall display had been installed. At the center was a large photograph of the center during construction, surrounded by smaller photos of families who had already been helped by foundation programs. But what made the display special was the plaque at the bottom, which read, "In honor of all who risk themselves to protect the vulnerable, especially Maria Santos, whose courage saved a child, and all the everyday heroes who choose to act when others need help." Below the plaque was a small display case containing the car seat in which Marcus had found Sophia that stormy night, now cleaned and preserved as a reminder of where the center's mission began. Maria stared at the display with tears in her eyes. "I never thought of myself as a hero," she said quietly. "That's what makes you one," Marcus replied. "Heroes don't think about being heroes. They just do what needs to be done." As the group dispersed to enjoy the opening festivities, Marcus found a quiet moment with David and Rebecca. Sophia was playing with toys in the center's new childcare area, supervised by trained staff who were part of the center's permanent team. "I need to tell you something," Marcus said to them. "When I first found Sophia, I had no idea that saving her would change my entire life. But it has in ways I never could have imagined," Rebecca smiled. "Changed your life how?" "I spent 15 years in construction thinking I was just building things," Marcus explained. "But now I realize I was preparing for this, learning how to manage projects, work with teams, solve problems under pressure. Everything I learned before was training for what I'm doing now." David nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes the path to where we're supposed to be isn't straight. Sometimes it takes a crisis to show us what we're really capable of." Marcus looked around the bustling center, watching families accessing services, children playing safely, and community members connecting with each other. "The night I found Sophia, I thought I was just helping one baby. I never imagined it would lead to helping hundreds of families." "That's the thing about doing the right thing," Rebecca said. "You never know where it will lead, but it almost always leads somewhere better than where you started." Later that evening, after the last visitors had left and the center was quiet, Marcus walked through the empty halls one final time before locking up. In his pocket was his phone, which had been buzzing all day with messages from other cities wanting to learn about the Foundation's model. There was talk of expanding to Milwaukee, Detroit, and Cleveland, opportunities that would have seemed impossible just months ago. But as he turned off the lights and set the security system, Marcus wasn't thinking about expansion or future opportunities. He was thinking about that moment in the storm when he first heard Sophia crying, and the split-second decision to run toward the sound instead of away from it. That decision had set in motion a chain of events that had brought Maria's courage to light, helped David and Rebecca rebuild their family, exposed a criminal network, and now was providing hope and resources to families throughout Chicago, all because he had chosen to help when help was needed. As Marcus walked to his truck in the parking lot, he noticed that the evening sky was clear and full of stars, a stark contrast to the stormy night that had changed everything. His old pickup truck looked out of place next to the newer cars that had been parked there during the day, but Marcus had decided to keep it as a reminder of where he had come from and what really mattered. His phone buzzed with a text message from David. "Thank you for everything you've done. Not just for Sophia, but for all of us. You've shown us what it means to be truly wealthy." Marcus smiled as he started the truck and headed home to his small apartment, which he had also decided to keep despite his new salary. He had discovered that happiness didn't come from having more things, but from having more purpose. As he drove through the city streets, Marcus reflected on how one moment of choosing to help a stranger had transformed not just his own life, but the lives of everyone connected to that stormy night. Sophia was growing up safe and loved. Maria had recovered and was stronger than ever. David and Rebecca had rebuilt their relationship and found a new mission. And dozens of families were already benefiting from the resources at the new center. Marcus Thompson had learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply show up when someone needs help, even when you don't know who they are or how it will change your life. He had saved a baby during a storm, not knowing she belonged to a billionaire CEO, but discovering that every child belongs to all of us, and every act of courage creates ripples that can change the world in ways we never expect.